Okay, we're now at item 4B. David Stein is here to talk about the clubhouse at the country club. Thank you for your patience this evening.
You're welcome. I'm glad I had the opportunity to see that.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
The old one, is it the same? Different. Okay, thank you.
So again, I'd like to just put this in context. David Stein and his firm, Silver Petroselli, are the people who did a review and assessment of the clubhouse at the country club in 2011. And there has not been an update to that report. This is not updating the report. But we wanted to ask about different ideas that have come up so people, again, have more facts as we discuss what we want to do with this property and the building. And in some proposals, the building would be demolished, and many people think that's a very good idea because of the degree of disrepair and the cost to repair it. Other people think it would be a good idea because we don't have any current uses that we know we want to use it for. Some people have said, well, if we don't know now, perhaps we should mothball the building so that we have options later. And we were kind of talking in a vacuum because we didn't have a good sense of what the different costs and considerations are. So David has taken a look at this again without totally reviewing the building again, but to bring us up to speed on what he has here is 3 options. Perhaps we'll want to ask about other ones. So, please.
Great. Well, thank you, and thank you for the opportunity to come back and to reconnect with the building. Obviously, we had to go back into our file and our memory banks and sort of open up and remember where that building was. I know it well anyway, as my parents actually were previous residents in town, so obviously familiar with the building just on a personal level too. So the context of our original proposal was to go in and really, with a fresh set of eyes, look at the infrastructure of the building. Really what the intent was an infrastructure evaluation of the building. And at that time, in 2011, and I think it was really early 2011, that's really when we started to get our feet wet on that. And then ultimately the report was completed just in December, where we published that final report, and I think we made a presentation to this board at that time, was to really look at the condition of the building. The building was, I think, relatively occupied and being used in a relatively full capacity at that time. But we clearly saw that there were maintenance items, and the overall infrastructure of the building needed improvement. So let's just talk about. I just want to talk quickly about the previous report, but then sort of drill into what we really are looking at now and kind of what I have in the handout. We saw that a building that was built in the late 1960s, I think I have it dated around 1966, is sort of the era in which it was finally completed. The building was modernized a bit in terms of upgrades, but ultimately the structure of the building was the same as it originally was from 1966. The roof, in many areas, needed repair, and we noted that in our report. Windows, we saw rotting of those windows. These are original 1960 era windows, so we saw single pane windows that were there. We looked at the boiler, really the physical plan of the building, and saw original components that were there that have been modified over time. Some air handler units were replaced, but ultimately it's original generation equipment that was there. That obviously worked, but needed repair, and it got to a point where it was really beyond its sort of useful life. So our report took the approach to create some type of priority to that. And we looked out at sort of at, it could be a 5-year window or longer, because we know that when you're looking at these feasibility reports that you're not going to do everything at once. So if you go back to that report, you're going to see we created sort of a priority 1, 2, and 3, anticipating that, you may want to do this over 5 years. So with that being said, let's fast forward. Here we are to 5 years at that point, and really I understand that the building hasn't, major improvements haven't taken place from there. The roof has not been replaced, the windows haven't been replaced, the boilers haven't gone through full replacement. The code conformance items that we mentioned, for example, of ADA accessibility and such, were not addressed. So here we are today, and looking at the question of where, what do we do with this building? What are the possibilities? And I'm drawing on and I've used the comparison. We're the architect for record for a former middle school in East Haddam, which is currently in the process of being converted to a municipal facility. So we went through that same analysis. This was a building that has sort of sat for many years, okay, and we're just luckily, but we're converting a large building over to a municipal center. So it's sort of drawing on that experience of how we're sort of evaluating buildings and what they can become. The first step that we began to look at and say, what, you've already sort of decommissioned the building in its original intent. And this building was designed for one specific use. Clearly, one specific use. The architecture clearly speaks to that. So we have to be sensitive to that and be aware that, if you are talking about any type of adaptive use, what does that really mean to the architecture of the building? So we said the first thing you really need to do at this point, before you begin to really get to any next steps of looking into the future, is decommission the building. People call it mothballing. I think you really, our opinion is you're already kind of doing that right now. But there are key elements that we would recommend that you continue to do to preserve that, because buildings, and especially in the example of the East Haddam project, they have left that building alone. They have done nothing but literally mothball it. And by that, we've witnessed this building has deteriorated exponentially because of that. Buildings need to breathe. They need to be used. Doors need to be open. Windows need to be open. They need to be used for them to survive. And so the first thing that we'd recommend is address those roofing issues. That doesn't mean a full roof replacement of the building, but identify what you can of the damaged areas that are there and do partial repairs, partial replacement to sustain that superstructure, because the last thing you want to do is have any of the elements enter into that building, and especially if it's unoccupied, you'll never know it even exists, okay, until it's too late. So you want to preserve that. So repairs to some of those rotted windows, and we've already identified a lot of this work that we did was visual back in 2011. They were obvious to the trained eye, and probably, frankly, obvious to the untrained eye too. You're able to see some of these areas. So we would recommend going in and identifying those areas and doing repair and replacement to that. And with that, we're saying costs could easily range, to $100,000 to do that. I think once you do that, you're still able to maintain your small portion of the function that you're doing right now. There's no reason why that can't be done. You may want to look at some investment in maybe zoning or taking off a good portion of. Right now, the physical plant serves the whole building in many different ways. It's zoned in a different way, but if you're only using a small fraction of the building, it may make sense to invest in something that just serves that purpose. Right now you're currently using the locker rooms in a capacity, so the hot water generation, you don't need to heat all the hot water that was intended for the entire building. Maybe you only do something smaller. So that would be our recommendation for option number one, is address the issues that are clear right now, so you have time to collectively go around and make those informed decisions and decide what you want to do with the building. So that kind of leads into, okay, so if I'm going to do that as sort of my option one or my step one, Option number 2 is now to really go down to that true general repairs and replacements of the bigger components of the building, to really give you then the option to study what your program might be. You know, there's discussions of what other municipal uses could that be, or quasi-municipal uses brought into the building. I draw the parallel of the East Haddam project because that's where they went to evaluate this building and determine what town functions were going in there. Were they bringing in the senior center, register of voters, parks and rec, their Valley Health District was being brought in. That's where you begin to sort of evaluate what does this building want to be. But the first thing you need to do before you do any of that is you need to begin to make improvements to the site. You're already, regardless of what you end up doing, you're going to need to do site improvements such as parking repairs, ADA accessibility, proper site lighting, mechanical systems. Regardless of the use that's going to go there, you're going to need to replace these boilers. And I think you replace it in a way knowing that it allows flexibility for distribution depending on what that overall use would be. Electrically, you want to improve life safety components. I mean, that's key. If you're going to do anything to this building and look at investing down to the future, you're going to need to improve your emergency lighting system, your fire alarm and notification system, and the electrical panels and main distribution that goes into the overall piece. And then you may do some lighting efficiency improvements, just the sort of key areas. So we look at this similar sort of if we were doing a corporate building, we sort of improve the envelope, the core of it, and allow that shell to be developed on what is that tenant or what is that use coming through in the future. And based on that, we're saying, you know what, if you invest in $80 to $85 a square foot, I mean, that's kind of a general thing of a repair and restoration effort to the building. Now the building's fully preserved. Now the building has new heat, it's functioning, and now you have the ability to evaluate what would get placed in there. And this building does have adaptability. You have big spaces on that upper level. So you wouldn't be renovating that. You know, you wouldn't be replacing any of the fit and finishing items. You would only be really touching the envelope of the building, you know, the 5 sides, the roofs, the ceilings, and then the core physical plant is where you would do your distribution and replacement for that. And lastly, and this is a tough one for architects to talk about because we're asking about demolishing buildings. Our job, we're trained to build buildings, but ultimately our job is to really look at what is the best use for the space. So if there was the concept, and we're looking at these as options, as clearly as in opinions that we're trying to present here, as the option of, okay, you really decide that the building just can't be adapted. It's either too large for the use that we need, because I think I want to point out that this building is it's very difficult to sort of sever at any point just because of its configuration. Okay, so it's not like I could take a good portion. Let's take the front end of the building and knock down the other point. Coincidentally, the East Haddam project that I'm talking about, we're knocking down half the building and preserving the historical piece that was built in 1937. We don't have the ability to do. This building wasn't built in additions that we could actually do that. So you don't have the ability, in our opinion, to really sever a portion of this building off. So with that being said, option number 3 is if you were going to demolish the other building, then you have the possibility of building something new. And all I really looked at is a pair to what you currently have right now. And we looked at your clubhouse and the golf component and said, without going through any program with any of the golf associations, said, you know what, let's just hypothetically look that you were going to downsize this 40,000 square foot building and only build about 10,000 square feet on the parcel. What would that cost be? And that's where you see the $5.3 million figure that's there. I do want to point out and footnote at the bottom, because it's an important thing when we are throwing around numbers here. none of these numbers contemplate the hazardous material exposure that's there. We're sure it's there, but in terms of what magnitude that will be. The building was built in 1960. It hasn't gone through an asbestos lead or PCB abatement. I'm sure there's some of those there. That type of invasive testing has not been done. Clearly, you're going to need to do that as you move forward to the next steps, but we would not recommend that you do any of that testing until you know that's the case, because then you're going to be immediately mandated to do that. So our recommendation is put it on your action item, but don't need to do that at the moment. So that's kind of the general summary of the context of what we tried to look at. Clearly, what we were doing in 2011 was a really detailed feasibility study. This kind of stepped back to give you our opinion on what could be the potential options. And really, we tried to simplify it to very different, and there could clearly always be things well within the middle.
Thank you. This is very helpful. I'd like to ask you something about option one. Two
Yeah.
things, actually. You talked about if we were going the mothball route,
Yeah.
which, as you said, it's kind of what we've been doing, except for one small area. You talked about maybe having a smaller hot water heater, furnace, whatever it is. Is that included in your cost number?
Yeah,
to replace it?
I would think so, yes. I did. I contemplated that you were going to do some improvement. You know, you've received numbers already, I think, for repairs to the roof, and, you know, that's probably, that's probably about $50,000 to begin to do roof work. I looked at probably doing another $25,000 to windows and seal up some of the penetrations on the facade. And my thought was, you're probably going to invest about $25,000 on something that's just centrally located to the locker rooms and to the pro shop and related to that. So that's kind of the general thought that I had with that number.
On the roof repair, Tony, correct me if I'm wrong, I think that relates to areas that Brad has already identified.
Correct, right.
So we're planning to do that. This would not cover new areas that need repair.
Yeah.
And the way this roof is going, I guess that's...
Yeah, and
just keep
the
checking.
challenges with this high sloped roof, and these are aggressive pitches on these roof, it's not like a traditional home shingle where you really could see delamination of the granules on the shingles. We do not see any sagging, which gives you some indication that your underlayment or your decking is deteriorated. But I think if you're gonna go that route, you're gonna need to sort of get up there with a roofer to try to do a little bit more forensic investigation and determine which areas. Some may be visible, some may be not. So it's going to be really a hands-on approach to decide where to start and honestly where to stop. Because do we begin to go, because we'll get to a point where you say, let's just replace the whole thing, and that's not what I was trying to intend to do. It's a fine line. It is a very fine line at this point. So I think identify the areas that you clearly know and then make some educated guesses on, okay, that area is probably problematic, let's just go ahead and address that before it becomes a problem. But clearly this is not intended to be we're replacing the entire roof, because that's not for $100,000 will not cover that cost.
You also mentioned that a building needs to breathe and sort of live, and as we've sort of reduced the usable portions and the portions that we are using, over what period of time do you think we could maintain strategy number one if that's what we chose to do? Say, okay, we just want to keep it, we're not ready to decide, but we want to preserve it as it is and have the option.
There clearly isn't a time clock associated with this that will tell you when your time to move on. What I can guarantee you that is the more you leave it untouched, the quicker it's going to deteriorate. But I think by this proposal, it begins to give you, 3 to 5 years worth of time. And that's kind of how we approach the first report is, that's kind of a window that you could kind of work with anything to be able to project out that far. We can't unless we're building brand new. And then I could easily say that will, that's a 20-year roof, or that's a 30-year roof, for example, or a 25-year boiler.
So I guess we've been doing the roofing as you've suggested. We've been looking at the windows or doors now, and so that's very helpful frame
Yes.
for this. Are there other questions? Susan?
Okay, I'll see.
Sometimes you cover what I'm asking, so you go.
I wanted to start with the evaluation. It was done early 2011. So what kind of evaluation have you done since on the building?
Okay, so we haven't rolled up our sleeves and got back into building. We really went back to the context of our report, knowing that the building hasn't been modified in really any capacity, and I think that's the reason why we didn't go back to sort of evaluate and determine that. We gathered some reconnaissance of what some of the areas, the key areas that you've worked on, but really the context of this was look at the report and then where we stand now. What are other options of where we are? So this clearly wasn't a reevaluation of the facility.
So I guess my concerns are, that was 5 years ago. You just stated, based on this evaluation, maybe you have 3 to 5 years of timeline, which we already went through the 5 years of timeline, at least since your evaluation was done.
Yeah, if you do option one.
And I just wanted to say, because I don't think you said it publicly, that the crowd or the people watching heard it.
Okay.
Option number 2, which was to actually do the repairs and fix the building, but not rip it down and restart it, which is $5.3 million. You have an estimated cost of $3.5 to $4 million to repair the building back to.
Correct. If I spoke too quickly or overlooked probably
I
a very
think, I
important
could have missed it, but I don't think you actually stated that.
Maybe I didn't. So
just
yeah.
everybody knows you're talking $3.5 to $4 million. If you wanted to actually physically repair the entire building back to.
Yeah, and we look and we categorize this, and I want to sort of be clear because the terminology is important because it is in the context of the building code. The option number 2 is repair and replacement of key components. These are alterations. These are not renovations. Okay, we are replacing and repairing key components and what I mean, and these areas are the exterior building envelope, any exterior site improvements which are really germane to the clubhouse, which would be the parking lot, walkways, pathways, and so forth, and those are relative to ADA accessibility. That's probably the big key component of it. Mechanical systems and electrical system, the physical boiler, and that we're anticipating the cost could range from $3.5 to $4 million, and that's where I referenced the $80 to $85 a square foot for that. Sure.
I just wanted to clarify something you said about option 1.
Okay.
And the broad number of $100,000, and you throw out a figure of $25,000 for windows. That's patching windows. That's not replacing
absolutely.
windows.
This is not replacing windows. There may be a sill replacement. There may actually be just a full sash replacement, depending on it.
Right.
But these are not new. This is not a full new renovation window.
Right. It's important for all of us to get our head around that.
Thank you. If I didn't.
And
clarify.
also in connection with option 1, sort of decommissioning the building, would there be also ongoing costs in addition to
Well, there's
this
still
outlay?
maintenance. You need to heat the building.
Right.
Okay, so there's freeze protection, so you got to do that.
Right.
You do have to maintain life safety components to a building, such as exit signs need to be maintained, sprinkler system, which you do have, needs to be maintained. So all of that has to take place. Once you do that, it's an abandoned building, and the building code really doesn't allow you to do that. So you need to make sure that all those life safety components are operational, regardless of no one's in the space.
Under option 1.
Under option
Which is
1.
basically the mothball.
Correct.
All right, you have to make it safe for the moths. Okay, so
Or anybody
else, right?
that enters the building.
So under option 2, you mentioned exit signs and lighting and heat, but you'd also have to look at whether or not the infrastructure regarding the sprinkler system was up to code, correct?
Yes, so that's where we're really not only just maintaining what you currently have. That's where we're saying let's improve what's there. Let's bring those to current code compliance.
So if you zone the infrastructure, we have to be careful when we use the word zone because it means something different in this context than it did in the other presentation. When you zone the infrastructure, do you have any idea, as you sit here today, how many zones we'd likely be talking about?
Yes. Yeah, I think, and maybe I actually did try to put I put together
I'm not going
a,
to hold you to it.
no,
If
that's
you could just
okay.
give us a
I
thought.
actually have an exhibit, so I did a
Oh.
sketch, because that's what us architects do.
Okay.
And,
Yes, that is what you guys do.
And that's kind of how we think. I think I only have, I apologize, I only brought a few copies. But what you begin to see is, that's kind of how you're functioning the building right now.
Right.
And what you see in, I think, yellow is those are the lockers, essentially. And in the middle are the restrooms, okay? So that really needs to become one, that's one zone in itself. To the right, where the clubhouse is, that's sort of a separate zone, okay? And then upstairs really is its own, its second floor, and I have the floor plan, but I think it's sort of irrelevant,
Right.
it's non-occupied, so that would sort of be its own zone at its point. And all we would do is just provide enough really heat at this point, because air conditioning, we'd want to probably do some ventilation to get enough airflow going,
Moisture
but
out,
at a
yeah.
very minimal
Yeah.
level. But you really don't go beyond that, because we don't know what the uses is. We don't know whether you're going to potentially carve this up into 3 or 4 different mini spaces. That would be done as far as a future renovation
But
project.
the things that you would zone would be air handling, sprinkling, life safety issues, and you said what, lighting?
And lighting.
And lighting.
Yeah,
Okay.
and lighting.
And I have one other question. So, and it's theoretical, but I get what you're saying, that you can't really, sort of downsize this building and say, well, we're going to take off a bunch, and because it's a funny building, the topography's crazy. So you can't go this way. Is it possible to sever a building this way?
I'll tell you, is it possible? Yes. In your arrangement, no.
Okay.
If you look at the exhibit that I have, I'm showing you the boiler plants, and there actually are the various mechanical rooms that are throughout there. So ultimately, yes, if your whole physical plant was up on that one level, then fine. If not, it's all being distributed from below. So we're essentially using both levels. And so that means I need to egress down to that level, and I need to enter to that level, and before you know it, and you can see by the scale of those, that they take up a fairly good footprint of that first level. So could it be done? Yes, but the way that it's arranged right
But it
now
would be
really
stupid.
doesn't make sense to do that.
Okay.
And probably the bigger challenge, as you mentioned, is clearly the topography.
Right.
I mean, the building is sort of nestled into the earth in that way, and how do you begin to sort of infill and bring earth to make this more of a level building? I think to try to achieve that, you're really going beyond the means of
Okay. I just
what's
wanted to-
feasible.
Ask that question. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? Tony?
Yeah, I have 2 more. So,
Sure.
option 1, which we're calling mothballing, but at the same time, there was some talk about current use or current usage. In your opinion, can we handle taking care of option 1 for whatever the cost may be, somewhere around $100,000, but continue to use the building in the manner we're using it now, which is strictly the bottom floor, locker rooms,
Yes.
bathrooms?
Yes, and that's my recommendation of maybe looking at sort of desegregating some of the physical plant right now that's intended to sort of serve the whole building, and look at maybe segregating, creating a small, maybe it's the hot water is only just serving that one area and it's not distributed out to other areas, or the electric service is sort of segregated. So that's what so it can be done. You have to be, you probably would need to really look at that further in terms of, with your code official, in terms of means of egress and things like that, and how you're going to determine when you sort of bordered off and say nobody's really allowed to go in that area. So you got to compartmentalize that in a way. But yes, that is really the intent here. And I mentioned this is kind of your current use. The only thing is you haven't invested in doing some of those other areas. So phase 1 is really, in our opinion, is what you're doing now, other than the repair item, the major repair item.
And my last point, on option 3, it's a little shocking. So for the $5.3 million, you're talking only that cost if we only build a building that's about 20% of what we currently have. So instead of 43,000 square feet, you're talking about a 10,000 square feet building.
5 million?
For 5.3
3.3
million.
million.
So we would rebuild the building, but we'd only get a building that's less than a quarter the size of the current one for that kind of cost, in your opinion.
Let me just give you, maybe this is a close enough example that you could understand. Our firm does a lot of K through 12 work throughout the state, and the state defines, they have what's called a renovate as new status, that essentially you could go into an old building and you really have to renovate it like new and certify that this building is really a new building at the end of the day. And the threshold that's there is $450 a square foot. That's what they said as a guideline. You need to prove to me that you could renovate this building less than $450 a square foot. And that includes everything, okay? That's not just the construction cost, that's the design cost, that could be site acquisition cost, that could be all of that. So when you begin to sort of back that off, and we're showing $325 a square foot, you know, you can't build a 43,000 square foot building for the numbers that we're showing. So that's really the threshold when you're beginning to deal with older buildings that you're trying to renovate and adapt and bring up to modern codes. It's fair. It's difficult to do that.
And
Okay.
$80 to $85 a square foot in option 2, which you round up to 3.5 to 4 million. That also doesn't get us a usable building. That
No.
gets us a safe building, and it gets us an upgraded infrastructure.
Right.
But no one's bought a sofa.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's not. The majority of your building is not occupiable.
There's no dance floor. There's no curtains. There's no.
Well, I think it's more, as I understand what you're saying, it's more basic than that. What we have is a safe and secure envelope, and perhaps some lighting, but
No, we're in option 2.
in option 2, but no usable space, because we haven't, nobody can move in and use that space.
Yeah. The intent
And
is
no,
your.
I said that.
So-
Didn't I say that?
Well, so I'm clarifying, because I think it's, it's more than carpeting or sofas, it's walls and whatever you want to do in there. And is that what then we move to renovations, is that right? So in
Correct.
addition to general repairs and replacement, you would then move to renovation. And did you say that the assumed cost for renovation is $400 and something dollars? Or that's something else?
That would really
That's
sort of
something
all
else.
depends on what the program would be. So
Okay, so you don't we don't know what that
We don't-
cost
we
in
don't
addition.
know.
Okay. Anything else?
I was using sofa as a metaphor. I didn't actually mean sofa.
But I just wanted to be clear, because as I understood
So far,
it,
so
it was,
good.
it
Okay,
was,
all right.
So if you
it's
wanted
for-
to put the recreation
Correct.
department in there.
That would not get you there.
More money than just.
you would then need
Then you have to decide what you
determine
want.
what that would be, and then there would be renovation costs
On top of that.
associated with that.
to
on top
cover the
of this.
gym or whatever.
And on all of these, you have asbestos, lead, and PCB not included in number 2 and number 3.
Correct.
Period.
Correct. We're not
Which is-
environmental
could be
engineers, so I'm
substantial.
unable to.
Could be substantial.
Yeah, and we've seen numbers as easily as adding another $500,000 on a project like this when you're dealing with a full abatement of 43,000 square feet. So that's a number that once you get further down, you really need to add to your due
Right.
diligence list.
Any other questions? If not, thank you very much. Very
You're
helpful.
welcome. Thank you.
Right, we are at item number 6. Terry Gilbertson is here to give us an update on the electric vehicle charging station grant proposal. And again, just to remind everyone, we had a proposal to put a second electric vehicle charging station at the library. It was approved by the Library Commission. Some questions were raised about location and different types of charging stations, and so we asked Terry to revisit the question and give us an update. Thank you, Terry.
A lot of handouts tonight, huh?
Welcome.
Recycle, yeah.
So our community had an opportunity to apply for a grant. It was a short time frame, and we applied for it, and before we had a chance to speak with you about it, we got it. And so what's in front of you is a option
Thank you.
to
Thanks again.
accept it or not, in my view. This is a grant managed by DEEP. It is designed to increase the amount of electric charging stations for electric cars. If you, in that industry, there's a thing called range anxiety, where if you have an electric car and you're worried about being able to get home, the idea is to put electric car charging stations is in many places as you can. I have some personal familiarity with it because in my role in assisting you in your public works building, we tried to future-proof the building as much as we could. We were building a lot of infrastructure there. We were lucky to get enough to get a deep grant for that charging device. The most comments that we've had about it is that it's really great, they really like it, except that why'd you put it there? Why not at the library? So when the next grant opportunity became available, we talked about it, and we thought that, gee, that library would be just the place. The first handout was a map, and it's an aerial view of the library. There's the north-south arrow on the map kind of works. The idea is that the charger would be either in the southerly parking lot right next to the handicap spots. Alternatively, there was some interest when we spoke with the library board about this, is that it would be also available to be put in close by the building in the easterly parking lot.
I only see one.
I can't
This is where they like to.
Isn't this the proposed location?
Regional possible.
Correct.
Wait,
This is
what?
where the library commission.
Okay.
likes to see it.
Right
That
here?
was the air
So they're
conditioning.
losing
Yeah,
unit.
where are the big air conditioning shed? I was wondering
thing
that
that casts
It's
myself.
that
little
little dark
X's.
spot right in between the two parking lots.
Oh, it is?
Yeah.
Little square.
Oh,
Okay.
okay.
So we would either be in the big parking lot that shares with the center
okay.
building, or in what some people call the employees' parking lot, but I'm told that that's not a completely accurate statement either. So it's in the other parking lot.
Terry, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I'm not clear on this map where the two options are.
I think it only shows one option.
Where that little line.
We don't show any options.
No, we're not
Oh, you don't show any options?
So it's either here
Here.
or there.
Oh, I
This is
see,
where
I
the
thought you
library
had them
commission
marked
wants it,
here.
Right
Okay,
where the
great.
black car
Okay.
space is.
Where's
That's
the
where the
other
library
view?
commission originally.
Maybe
did
this is
that.
where-
The library commission doesn't like it because of handicap.
Great map.
So where there's
but
black
I can't tell the options.
Exactly.
Okay, let's just take a moment, and
Anyway.
Terry, you want to show everybody where the
happy to.
two spots
We were all
are?
mixed up.
It could be either here.
I thought this jobby was.
would be the southern area.
Right, right.
And
this is where the library commission would like to see it.
How much was the grant for?
Pardon me?
How much was the grant given to us?
Oh, the grant that we had to actually price out what it would cost for us to, for the vendor, and the grant was, that we got was for $8,266.62. It was a $10,000 maximum grant, in round numbers.
Did the library commission recommend one of these locations, or prefer?
There was a healthy discussion about locations, and I believe that while the grant presumed the electrical run to the southerly parking lot, we believe that we can easily accommodate a near location in the easterly parking lot if somebody wishes that. It's not the trench either goes one way or the other way.
And but did the library commission opine on that location issue? Or there
I
was-
think there was no vote taken, but certainly there were a number of people in the room that were more interested in the easterly parking lot than the southerly.
Okay, thank you.
This one.
But did you say it would be adjacent to the handicap parking
Correct.
spot? Is that a problem in any way, or?
I don't think so.
Okay, it doesn't interfere with the use of the handicap parking spot?
Oh, no. And the parking lot thing, the second handout that you got, is the stanchion that shows what it looks like. And this one unit would be able to charge 2 automobiles at the same time.
So you need 2 parking spaces.
Well, it doesn't consume parking spaces, however, it doesn't, they don't have to be dedicated to that.
Oh,
There's nothing, no part of the grant that says that there has to be no parking at the, so it's not necessarily.
so if it's not being used, you can park there. Got it?
Certainly.
Yeah, I got it.
If I had an electric car and I went to the charging station and there was somebody with a non-electric car in the spot, I'd be annoyed.
Especially
But
if you
that's
were
allowed.
pulling off the highway to
Correct.
do this.
If I had range anxiety, and how do we address that?
I just happened to be in Bridgeport, and they have one of these in their parking lot at the municipal building, and there's a sign, parking only for electric
Dedicated.
users.
Right.
What do we do over here at Public Works?
We don't have,
It's not restricted.
not restricted at all.
Is this this is a single, correct?
This
It's
is a
not
double.
a double.
This is a double.
It's a double, okay, I'm sorry, you might have said that, I apologize.
No?
I was getting visually,
Mm-hmm.
you know.
Mm-hmm.
So as liaison to the Library Commission, I did hear Terry's presentation that evening, and I believe you had actually a handout which showed some options as to what some signage can or will say. And there were differences, such as you can't park at all here unless
Right.
you're and then there were others, and I think the library was interested in the less intrusive, which is, if it's available, take it. So there was a little bit of a difference of,
I only have one page of that with me. There's 2 required signs.
Thank you.
If you pass it around. We're required to put up what's becoming a universal charging station sign that tells the people that this is where you plug in. And another one that, identifies the fact that we got it from the state. And the other signs they offer, and they, by the way, give it, those signs are given to the town to put up on this post, as we've done here. The other signs are suggestions that some people use for banning it. I think that until it becomes a problem, my recommendation to you is that we share the parking space, because we can always put up the no parking sign, and I think the infrastructure is more important to have in place, and when it becomes a problem, you can talk about that. I think that shared parking, would rather have less asphalt than more asphalt, and I think we're not at that density level where it's a problem here. But
And potentially, we have the ability to charge 4 cars.
After a
1,
certain
2, 3,
amount of
4.
time, can
Right,
you
four
charge?
cars at a time. And I'd like to think that might happen, but I can't believe it in this little town that there would be 4 people pulling off the merit to charge their cars. I don't know.
Well, Tesla is lobbying
I
the
saw
General
that on
Assembly
television,
to be able to
exactly.
do direct marketing to
But
customers. So
4 cars, I don't know.
Terry, I think there were other questions that were raised.
to speak to that, Beth, if you don't mind, I asked our assessor this question: how many we have? And apparently we have 28 plug-in vehicles registered to Woodbridge residents, which actually surprised me. If you expand that to a hybrid, and not all hybrids are plug-in hybrids, but hybrids, we have 275 hybrids
Amazing.
registered to the town. So it's really quite interesting.
That
Apparently our assessor can do what the state DMV cannot, and that's
Why am I not surprised?
and identify this. It was quite a feat that she was able to do.
How busy is your stations now?
I think I notice it more because it happens to be outside my window.
Good.
And we, at the time when we installed this one, we were not allowed to have any management devices, counters, or anything else like that. The grant's been changed some. We can do that. And whenever we do this, part of the grant, by the way, is we have to keep it. We have to offer free charging for 2 years, by the way, as part of this terms of this particular grant. So I see it in use probably 4 or 5 times a week.
And at 2 hours a pop, right? I mean, isn't that what they say?
I think that you can get, depending on the automobile, and it matters a lot on the temperature of the air of the automobile and the kind of automobile and the batteries that they have. But a 2 hour on a Nissan Leaf will give you a 2 hour charge. 2 hours will give you about a half charge, which will get you 35 miles or so.
Can I ask a follow-up to that? You're seeing a car 4 or 5 times a week, but that's a double station. There could be 2 cars at the same time.
Absolutely.
Have you ever seen it where 2 cars are there, so maybe a car couldn't charge at the same time?
I've not yet seen that.
No complaints about lack of access.
I've not seen that, but I don't know if they would get to me anyway, those complaints. You know, it's not, there's no.
We haven't had any.
Right.
Terry, I know several questions were raised. I don't have the list here, but I know they included upkeep of the charging station itself, removal costs, should we wish to remove it, repair costs if it breaks. Is there some kind of other charging station that works faster, you charge less? And also, what about placing it down near, more closer to the exit from the highway? Have you looked at those issues?
I sure have. You know, let's just a small primer. Is it level 1 charging is in your garage, in your household current. You plug it in, you buy your electric car, it comes with something in the trunk that you plug into your garage outlet, and it takes about 12 to 17 hours to charge your car, to get you going the 35 to 60 miles, depending on how much you spent on your electric car. The level 2 charging devices work on 220 single-phase electricity. That's just the one that we presently have in the town hall parking lot. And you can expect on a level 2 charging device to have a full charge in 6 hours, a nice healthy half charge in 3 to 4 hours. It all depends again on the battery and the car and the ambient temperature. There is a level 3 charger, sometimes known, also called as a DC fast charger, and that runs at 480 volts, 3-phase, and in a half hour will fill up. Pardon me?
No, I said, wow, that's
Yeah,
big difference.
it sure is. They cost about $100,000.
I'm assuming our grant's not covering anything.
It's a maximum of $10,000. And I understand that we were looking at something in the neighborhood of the West River ball field. And the West River ball field, by the way, does not have any electrical service whatsoever. And
That's a problem.
How about solar?
it's hard to get to the 480 volt, level 3 fast discharge. So, I think that this is an emerging issue, and quite frankly, this was a grant of opportunity, more so than if you don't care to have it, that's fine with me. But we just thought that we'd provide you with the opportunity.
Just, what about those other issues?
Oh,
Repair costs, removal costs, and anything else that would be of concern, should we go ahead?
The units, I believe, have a year's warranty on them. Our obligation to the state is for 2 years. So it is I would imagine, problematic. That the funding from the state does not involve any of those topics of repair, of removal, or anything else. Removal, I'm not much concerned about. It's a 220 volt electrical gizmo, and we would be able to handle that without any big deal. I do believe that in terms of repair, that because this industry is in the infancy, and that the charging devices that we're proposing here from the same company that delivered it here it's a Connecticut company. They're all made in Connecticut. They're anxious to have us, speak lovingly about their chargers, and I'm sure that if something went wrong with them, I'm quite positive they would repair it.
I have a question. Sure.
I should know this because we've just gone through the budget process, but each department reports their electrical costs separately, correct?
Correct.
As
We have
part of
separate
As part of the
meters.
building cost.
Right.
So is this going to get attributed to the library?
Yes.
The use of this
I would
electricity?
imagine it's the meter would be on, right, Terry? The library meter?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Would it appreciably, or you'd have to have 2 cars there every day charging all the time for there to be
We calculated
appreciable
that.
We did
cost?
calculate that out, and I believe it was $5,000 for one car to be charged
24/7.
24/7
24/7.
all year.
And I believe the library committee discussed this, and Tony assured them that if their electric bill spiked because of this, it would not be held against them.
don't
So we would take,
We
right.
won't ship it.
And we haven't seen any appreciable spike in the
In
public
public
works.
works.
Well, I would just hate for something so
bill.
positive
Yeah.
to turn into a negative if
Right.
it was a
Absolutely.
surprise.
Yeah, that's a good question.
That's where I'm.
I did ask our vendor to, and gave them our rate that we pay for electricity, which
Yeah.
is 18 cents per kilowatt hour.
Yeah.
And that his statement is that for 4 hours of charging, that it would cost $2.52
Okay.
at our rate. So that kind of puts a handle on, the
Cheaper than a
exposure
tank
that
of
you have.
gas. Even now.
Any other questions for Terry?
No, I have a comment though. I mean, I just don't see the need for this, an additional thing. I mean, I don't know, maybe we will have thousands of cars in a few years, but I think when you buy an electric car, you're supposed to know that you can supply your own, you can charge it in your house. Now, this would be people who accidentally need more power and they happen to be in Woodbridge. So I don't know. I'm not big on this thing. I feel like maybe $10,000 is nothing to the state to do this, but that's still coming out of the bigger budget, and we all get to pay for things like this.
It's definitely a
so-
right pocket, left pocket thing.
Yeah, right. So
I think
don't know.
the state gets the money from us, I
I
think.
feel good about having one and not just like an ornament in town. I don't know. I think that's how I feel. I don't know. Maybe some other people have other
I'll
things.
just add that we do have one that can handle 2 cars, which is pretty good. I'm not sure if, in my mind, we're at the point where we really have a need for additional ones. So that goes back to your question. Can you give me a little information on, obviously this grant must be something we have to decide on quickly, or you wouldn't be in front of us, but does it seem like this is something that might be available next year as well? Or, I mean, it obviously it was available 2 years in a row to us.
I can't answer that. I have no idea.
No feel for if it's just
No.
something that's out there.
I was surprised to see the second year. Quite frankly, I was surprised to see the first year, and it worked out very well. The infrastructure for the charging device at the Public Works was built in and baked into the project. We included a conduit, the wire, as all part of the base project. This is way before grants were thought of. This grant is just here. Whether or not it'll be a priority for the state next year or the following years, I have no idea.
Terry, to Maria's point that perhaps we'd rather use the money for something else, do we have any option to apply this grant in some other way, or ask for some modification for something else we might identify that you're aware of?
This grant was, we were required to fill out an address for this charging device. I'm not, I would have to inquire from that program whether or not you can reprogram it. I doubt it. My instincts are that you can't.
Well, so we have to vote to accept the grant or not accept the grant? Okay.
Correct.
We actually should make the motion and then
Right, I was just
discuss,
going to
but-
say, so I'm going
Right.
to make a motion that we accept the grant as described by Terry, I guess. And we'll know what that means.
I will second it.
Okay,
And
and now,
then-
we've had some discussion, and we will continue the discussion.
Okay, so I disagree with what Maria is saying very strongly, and for a whole host of reasons, but not the least of which is that we consider ourselves an enlightened town and a town that looks forward. And I think that this is an opportunity, as you say, and I'm not invested in whether it goes in the east parking lot or the south part. I mean, yeah. I mean, wherever people decide they want to put it is fine. But I think when these things come by way of the town, we send a message to our community that, you know, we're part of what's going forward, and we are progressive in the sense that we want these kinds of progress. And frankly, we want to incentivize people to do the right thing. And we're very conscious about environmental practices in all kinds of ways, as we heard tonight, regarding organic practices and everything else. I think this is one more component of that. So I think we should accept the grant.
You stole my thunder, but that's okay. I would
You
add
want
to
back?
that. No. But I'd like to think that maybe, I don't know if this is true, but this may also encourage more people to purchase electric cars in our town. I really do. I could be wrong. I'm just feeling.
Right. I mean, I think,
Yeah. So I agree with you totally.
Yeah, I don't agree with you. I agree with you wholeheartedly if we didn't have one already that serves 2 cars that we're not using. If it was our first one, yes, it tells our residents, if you have one, certainly use it. And we actually have one that serves 2 cars at one time, and yet no one seems to have ever seen it be used 2 at a time. Very seldomly being used 1. So I would agree with you 100%. If we had none, we should get one. It does encourage, obviously the state's trying to encourage people, the egg before the chicken, however you want to term it, so that it's available, feel more comfortable about buying one. We have a place for you to charge. So I do agree with you if we had 0. But having one and then adding one 2,000 feet away, or maybe not even, you know, if we could have put a station like this, found a spot in Lower Woodbridge, and yes, there is a website for everybody who owns an electrical car to be able to go on there and find out where the stations are. So if it was near an exit, the Merritt Parkway, or where our where our commercial base is, I certainly would be all for it. That area has much more demand. But to put a second one in 2,000 feet away, that we're not using the one that we have currently at total usage or nowhere near it, and yet really we're talking about, in all due respect, $10,000. If we find a need that, and God hope us, I hope we do, that 3 years from now or 4 years from now there's enough cars and need that really we're not able to service with this one station we have, then I would say the town at that time would be thinking that $10,000 or 12 or whatever it may be up to at that time would be certainly worth looking at. Not to mention the technology is changing drastically and quickly. And the truth is, in 2 years or 3 years when we may have need for more, these quicker service and more efficient, I don't want to call them a pump, but whatever they're called, their electrical stations might be.
well, that's true no matter what.
Yeah, and I just think for the 10,000,
I mean, that's true.
and disturbing the area of the library just from the little work that needs to be done, and the question about the parking, there is limited parking over there. I just think at this time, though, again, if this was our first one, I think at this time I'm kind of leaning towards not something we need. It's a nicety, but it's just.
So
Exactly.
I agree with
I don't think that this should be a mark of us being behind the times. I think it's just what the times need are a little bit more concern about how we deal with matters about spending money and the state's money or whatever.
Minds will differ. Let's vote. I just want to make a few comments. I think as we look at this, and I look at sort of a cost-benefit analysis, and I agree with Tony's comment that perhaps this is part of incentivizing people. I mean, we don't know. This is a young technology and something that I think we want to be part of and that we associate ourselves with. Do we need it at this point? No. Do I think that this money will go to some other purpose for the state other than an electric charging station somewhere else? I don't. I think it will just be an electric charging station somewhere else. I see no harm to the town. We can talk about the parking. One thing I was thinking as you were speaking is we could have a parking space, one space at the library that's short-term parking. So it's 15 minutes and then someone who wants to charge could park there. I really don't see a downside. I do see it as part of our general identity in the town of Woodbridge as forward-looking and very environmentally conscious. So for those reasons, I would support it. So, are there any other comments? If not,
I
sorry.
would like to follow up on that. I mean, I understand what everybody's saying. Like I say, if we didn't have one, my only thing is, based on that, if next year it's available again, will we put a third or fourth, even though they're not necessarily abusing? It's a nice thing to have as a second, and that's just I just want to make it clear that I agree with all of what you're saying. It's just that because we have one.
Yeah,
Just
well,
that's all.
these are, I mean, it's certainly an issue. Reasonable minds can differ. I don't think it's, it's not life-shattering one way or the other. It's whichever way you come down on the issues.
Absolutely.
Anything else? If not, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay, thank you, Terry.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Terry.
If there's no objection, I'd like to switch number 8 and number 7 and thank Barbara very much for her patience this evening. I didn't think it would take us this long to get to number 8. Good evening.
Hello,
Yes.
everyone's got a copy. Okay. So we're up for a renewal with our tenants. We have 3 tenants at the Darling House. They have a March 1st renewal. We basically took the lease agreement from last year. The only thing we've changed is the addresses for the tenants at item 1 and the term, item 3, and anywhere there was a date that referenced 2015, it changed to 2016, which would be the last page. So basically all of the same text from the previous year's
And it's the
lease
same
agreements.
tenants that have been there for the past year?
Correct, since last March.
I just want
Correct.
everybody to know that I've had communicated with Barbara by email, and we just basically, as she said, took the exact same lease that's been in existence with a couple of changes. I reviewed it from a legal point of view, it's fine, and it's the thing we drafted 1 year ago.
Right. At this point, we decided not to increase the rent. That might be something we'll consider again next year, but we're leaving it as it is right now.
This is a 1 year?
1 year.
Any questions for Barbara?
How much is the lease for? I'm just curious.
It's $900
That's in
900 for the
paragraph,
year or for the
for a month,
that's
per
in
month.
paragraph 4.
Paragraph 4 on the first page.
Barbara,
Yeah, I see.
currently, can you tell us again, remind us of what the current situation is there as far as tenants? And what recent past has been?
As far as the 3 tenants that we have there?
There's 3 in there now.
Correct.
They moved in, if I remember, a year ago.
Just a year ago, March. Yep.
And before that, there was 2 tenants. Is that what there was? And
Yes, there was. Yes, it was a couple that was there.
how is it working out with the 3? I know it's kind of
It's a
small.
very
quaint.
tight space.
Right.
They seem very compatible. I will have to say they spend a lot of time together.
I'm sure they do.
You go check it out and report
Yeah,
back. How do you do that?
When we've been there, we haven't heard any discord.
You gotta like each other. when it's that kind.
So it
Good.
seems like they get along very well.
Great.
They've been friends for a long time. So it's yeah.
And the Historical Society then reimburses the town, I'm imagining with these proceeds, for the operating costs of the facility, which is the heating oil, the phone, the electricity.
Water.
Water, right.
Yeah.
Just so.
And
Okay,
that's,
sort of circle
that was
back.
one of the things we put into the lease agreement, as well as, because when the previous tenants did use a lot of water, and we were carrying that cost, we put in a stipulation for, if they exceeded a certain amount per year for their water usage, that we would charge them for that. So-
And just so it's clear, it's because they have a garden, not because they're showering all the
Right,
time or something.
right. And
They added it.
since they have not been doing any farming this past year, it's more been the chickens and hens and things. They have not been utilizing as much water, so I don't anticipate they'd be going over their
It's obviously
usage.
been a successful landlord-tenant kind of relationship, so that's.
They're new to, I think, doing all the work themselves, so we work with them and explain to them things that haven't met our expectations, so they are amenable to anything that we've suggested as well. There is a separate attachment that that may not be included with this, that just talks to all their responsibilities for the exterior and maintaining it, and that's been kept up.
So one more question. We had budget hearings a few weeks ago, and when the Thomas Darling House presentation was made, I believe there was a fairly substantial $40,000 this year for some capital improvements. Has that been discussed with the tenants? Do they know that there's a plan to hopefully do some renovation, do some work?
We had some work done this past year that kind of caught them by surprise. That we weren't notified as to when the work was going to get started, so they came home one day and found out that their whole parking area had been sealed off and everything. So we'd love to be a little bit more proactive in letting them know when these changes are occurring, so that they can prepare for it, because they just came home and things were in disarray. So that's our hope for the next time we make these changes. And we are applying for the 1772 grant again. We've gotten half of the house done, and the back half needs to be done, but the work that was done looked great. And we've been trying to keep up with any repairs that are in immediate need of immediate attention as quickly as possible.
Okay. Is there a motion to authorize the first selectman to sign the tenant lease caretaker's house, part of the Darling House?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Any other questions or discussion? If not, all those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Thanks.
you.
Thank you for your patience.
Sure. Now we're item 7, which is the farm leases. And Mrs. Shaw is going to remind us of the procedure with the farm leases, which I think she does automatically when a certain date arrives during the year. She's an automatic pilot. I do want to say about these farm leases, when Louisa Cunningham made her presentation today, it includes some recommendations about what should be planted there and best practices. I think it's too close to the time of renewing these leases to require it, but I will propose that I speak with the farmers so that they take a look at this and see if to what extent they're amenable to doing it, and perhaps be thinking about this, assuming they continue in the future, because I think she's made some excellent recommendations for that. So, Mrs. Shaw.
Okay, well, these farm leases, we've been doing this for many, many years. I've included the guidelines that the board accepted in 2010. That's your first section. There have been several questions asked over the years, and I've addressed those in the second page that you have there, as to each individual lease spells out certain things for whoever is leasing that property, such as the Alegi Hitchcock lease, which is the Santoro's lease. They've asked for that again this year. In fact, all the farmers have asked for the same leases. And they have certain parameters they have to follow if you want somebody to get into the fields that they're using. And they ask simply that we give them advance notice so they can move animals if they have them in there. And each lease has been written and approved by the town attorney, backed by many town attorneys over the years. We go out for these leases in January. I put an ad in the paper, not an ad, but a notice that the farmlands are up again. Every farmer is interested in the property has to send me a letter saying what they're planning to do with the property. I've given you a list of the farm properties and who has asked for them again this year, and it happens to be these are the same people that asked in the past.
Jerry, did anyone ask, did anyone in addition to these people ask?
No.
So nobody was rejected or?
No. It was all pretty much the same. This comes to the board in February because the farmers their leases start March 1st. And that is the time that they have to start making their assessments of doing their soil testing, what they have to do to the property, as far as, they have to do any amending of the soils. And everything is organic, and that's spelled out in every single lease.
Could I ask a question before
Sure.
we do a motion or whatever? Okay.
Yeah.
I just have a question. It says that the lease starts on March 1st and terminates on December 31st, correct? So if someone like, for example, the Santoros, there's 3 months or whatever there that they're not using the town,
Yeah,
I'm thinking of them because they have horses, and
Right.
obviously, so they give up this property for 3 months? They can't
well,
put, or how does this all?
At that time, my understanding with them is that they really keep their horses in that upper lot because of the weather, mud season.
Which is not town property?
Not town
Okay,
property, that's
okay.
their property.
I can't think of another one, because most of the others are just
They
hay
use
and
their,
things like
that
that.
property for grazing or for hay.
Right, right. Okay.
The reason that it does go on to the 31st is that sometimes there have been years where you can get a cutting as late as November. Now, whether future management practices will change that, that's, that's up for the town to decide.
Right, and I also, just wanted to comment about Ellen's comments about, instituting these new practices and
Mhm.
stuff, and I think we need to revisit that, all of that with the farmers, obviously not this year, but next year, we
Yeah.
really need to make sure that's done. Okay, thanks, that's just a comment.
If not, I'd like to just put on the record what these leases are. It's Sarah Shepherd for Darling House North Hayfield, field north of 1932 Litchfield Turnpike. Both of those are for hay. Keith Arnold on the Fitzgerald property, the lower lot and 2 front lots hay. The 2 front lots are seated. Keith Arnold, Peck Hill Road, Eldersley Preserve, all 3 fields hay. Chris Sorensen, Bishop Westfield, Litchfield Turnpike, planting, harvesting hay. Mark and Lisa Santoro, a Leggy property adjacent to their property, harvesting hay and grazing cows and horses. And Tim Kriz on the Zwick property, Seymour Road, Acorn Hill Road, 20 acres. And in that case, Mr. Kriz has a note with Mr. Anderson to access the Zwick property through Mr. Anderson's property. Again, these are all renewals of leases in existence, but I just wanted that on the record. So I will make a motion that we renew the leases as I just outlined them and as they are more specifically detailed in our packets.
Second.
Any other questions or discussion? If not, all those in favor?
Aye.
We all did.
We all did.
Pick one. Whoever you want.
Okay,
Thanks, Jerry.
number 9, this should be quick, the MEDCOM agreement, Jerry? Didn't,
did.
oh, yeah, did we just vote?
Yeah, you did.
Yes,
Really
you,
fast, because we were busy seconding.
I must have been
The MEDCOM agreement, I just want to give you an update. The board approved the town entering into this agreement. This MEDCOM is a replacement of CMed, which was the organization that ran the public safety services for the town for many, many years, and for the region. Most of the towns in our region were members of CMed. CMed has disbanded. MEDCOM is the successor to CMed. It will be carrying out the same duties that CMed had carried out, which basically are they provide services to our ambulance services, ambulance service when the ambulance is on the way to the hospital. MEDCOM has the ability to interface with the hospital to say, there's an ambulance coming, we have these kind of injuries. So they coordinate that. They coordinate situations of a mass casualty in our town, and they also coordinate services of mutual aid when we need more than just the Woodbridge Fire Department, the Woodbridge Police Department. We get MEDCOM, and they take care of all that coordination. So it's something that all the towns do. We have an agreement, a proposed agreement to sign. The board approved us entering into the agreement with MEDCOM. There are some difficulties, some issues with the agreement itself, and many of the towns have not signed the agreement, although they've authorized their towns to enter into an agreement. I'm working with the lawyer for the city of West Haven on refining the agreement so it is acceptable to us. Hopefully by the next meeting in March, we will have some more information as to whether there's a new agreement for everyone to sign.
it's, as I understand it, technical changes. It's not the.
Not substantive.
It's not the
Right.
substantive, it's just the way it was written is technically.
Exactly.
Technology more than.
Terminology, they attached a couple of exhibits which really were not proper, and other town attorneys have come to the same conclusion that we have, so we're all going to try and work on it.
So do you need something from us today?
No, it's just an update.
Just information.
That's an update. Anything else on that? If there's no objection, I'd like to go to number 12, Town Council's report, because there are preceding items that really depend upon some action that we either will or won't take under Town Council's report. If that's no objection?
No objection.
Then, at this time, I will make a motion that we go into executive session pursuant to Section 1-200(6) of Connecticut General Statutes to discuss possible settlement of a claim by the Regional Water Authority against the town of Woodbridge concerning outstanding obligations. Is there a second?
Second.
Any questions or discussion? If not, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
You want to invite?
Okay, thank you. We have concluded the executive session. We're back in regular session now. No votes were taken during the executive session, and I would ask town council to describe the possible settlement which we discussed during the executive session.
The executive session concerned a discussion of the settlement of a claim made by the Regional Water Authority against the town of Woodbridge concerning an outstanding obligation that arose in 2011 as a result of the town's manager's operation of the Country Club of Woodbridge property. When the town manager left in 2011, he left an unpaid water bill in the approximate amount of $102,000.
Jerry, just to be clear, that was not Billy Casper Golf.
That was MDM Golf, Mr. Manchetti, who was the operator of MDM Golf. That was predates Billy Casper. So Mr. Manchetti and MDM left the town with this obligation to the water company. There is a state statute which says that the owner of the property is responsible for the water bill of a tenant or an operator of the property during the time that the town doesn't have possession. So we started off with the proposition that that they made a claim against the town because it was apparent to the water company that they would never get paid from Mr. Manchetti and MDM Golf because of all the issues that were public information in the newspapers about MDM's operation. So they made a claim against the town. Ed Sheehy and I met with the president of the board of the company, Larry Bingaman. The amount was $102,000. Larry agreed to reduce it by approximately $27,000. Our defense to this is that there was an intervening cause for a significant part of the water company bill, which was that there was a leak in the water line going to the country club during the month of February, which caused an inordinate amount of water usage when the club was not being operated. It was February and there was no golf, obviously. So we kept saying, listen, we're not, as the owner of the property, we're not responsible for the tenant's obligation because there was a third intervening cause which created the large water bill, even though a portion of the water bill was actually due for water usage. It was a small portion, but there is an amount of money that we have no defense to. So the water company agreed to give us a $27,000 credit, leaving a balance of $75,000. Since 2011, when we received the credit, I think Ellen and I once had a meeting with Larry Bingham, and we were trying to urge him that we really shouldn't be paying this or any significant portion of it because of the intervening cause of the leak in the pipe. The water company had knowledge. If they checked their meters, they would have seen the amount of excessive water use, and if they contacted us, we would have fixed it, as we did. As soon as Tony became aware of the problem, he sent somebody out and the leak was fixed. So recently, the water company has been contacting me and indicated that we are the largest account receivable that they have, and we've carried it for approximately 5 years, and their board would not allow this to continue, and they made a motion to file a lien against the town's property for the balance of $75,000. The lien was filed about a month ago, which was a cause for me to reinstitute settlement discussions. The bottom line is that the water company has agreed to accept a sum of $43,000 from the town for payment, full and final release and payment of this outstanding obligation, which continues to hang over the town's heads. I think the settlement is very reasonable. If we were going to defend the $74,000 claim, we would incur significant attorney's fees. This would probably be a long, protracted piece of litigation, and we would probably be spending almost, if not all, of the $43,000 fees, interest, that have accumulated over the years. So it's my recommendation at this time for us to settle this case, and I would hope that the Board of Selectmen agrees, but I'm happy to answer any questions that you have about this.
Any other questions or discussion? I just want to thank Jerry very much. This is an excellent settlement and was well done over many years. Thank you.
5 years, yes. Thank you.
If not, is there a motion to approve the settlement as described by Town Council?
So moved. Second.
Any other questions or discussion? If not, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, Jerry.
Okay.
We're now at other.
So the only other item I want to report on, as you all know, the Conservation Commission has made a recommendation to the Board of Selectmen to look into purchasing property on Litchfield Turnpike. It is owned by the Nugent family, and this is approximately 28 acres, I think, that is now open space. And Conservation thought it would be a very desirable piece as a continuation of its trail toward West Rock. And we were told by Conservation that there was an outstanding grant that it was going to be applying for that would cover 65% of the purchase price. And the Board of Selectmen approved the Conservation Commission's request to pursue the purchase and pursue the grant. Betsy, who is not here tonight because she's ill, was actively completing the application for the grant, and one of the requirements of the grant was that we get a title search, we get an appraisal, which we did. The grant application had to be in by February 2nd. Betsy had some continuing discussions with the owners of the property. The owners of the property are 4 members of the Nugent family, 2 nieces and 2 brothers. The agreement was that we would have the purchase price would be an average of the 2 appraisals that we did get. That came to a number of $207,000, the average, which the town would have gotten 65% from the grant if the grant was approved, and the purchase was contingent on getting the grant, and the remaining portion would have to be paid from the town's open space fund, which coincidentally was pretty much covered the balance. So it would have been money coming from the existing open space account and the remainder 65% coming from the state. So no real new money from the town. We learned that once we got the appraisals, the purchasers among themselves could not agree on whether they wanted to sell the property to the town for that, they were having their own issues. And we made it perfectly clear. I spoke to, I think, 3 out of the 4, one at 10 o'clock at night, trying to urge them to agree to this, and they called me the next morning, and it was the day before the application was due, and they said, we just can't, we're not ready to do it, we can't proceed. For the purchase price of $207,000. One of them had this astronomically high number, which we couldn't even consider.
I think it was like $600,000 or $700,000.
$485,000, more than double what the appraisals were. So we had to stop the negotiations. We did not apply for the grant. It is possible that the grant may become available next year, and if Conservation still wants us to pursue it, we will. The owners said that they will revisit us if there is the opportunity for us to get another grant later on in the future.
Well, that's amazing news.
Yep.
Only because they always wanted to sell that
Yep.
property.
I think that 1 or 2, I think they do. I think they all do, but they can't agree on the purchase price.
Amazing.
Well, interestingly, what Betsy found in putting the documents together was that in 2004, the town and the Woodbridge Land Trust together pursued the same grant for the property and had the same problem. In the end, the family, they couldn't come to terms with the family. But also, one of the things that Betsy has put in a huge amount of time on this, and I want to thank her very much. It came very close. And she did ask me to point out that the appraisals are good for a year. So if the family changes its mind and wants to go ahead, we have those ready to go, and we can do that.
And 2 of the members of the family were blaming the 3rd member for not giving them the information timely and keeping them advised that this was happening. I think there was one person who was sort of the lead, our contact, and he apparently, from what they say, didn't give them enough information and didn't make them aware that this was happening. But I couldn't get involved in the issues between the members, so we just left it the way it is.
Can I just clarify though, even though it's 27 acres, there's only one building?
One building lot.
Correct.
One building lot,
One
and
building.
I remember we had discussions about how to get in and out of the property. You had to build a road, and it was going to be expensive.
So
If you would
think
build
we
a building like that, you would build it, you build it for a house.
Right.
Yeah. There's significant wetlands, so there's very
Very,
little
very.
things you can do with it.
Yeah.
So that's the
Interesting
update.
development.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes. We're now at item number 10. Tony's
That's me.
report. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. The monthly report through January of 2016 is a budgetary surplus of $188,000 for the year. That brings our fund balance at about 9.51% of annual projected expenditures for fiscal year 16. Intergovernmental revenues have taken quite a turn for the worse. They originally had a surplus, but we've ensued three different state cuts in recent months. First was to pilot grants in the amount of $16,000. The second was a second round of cuts for a reduction of $42,000 in ECS funding. And finally, there was a municipal aid adjustment grant totaling $29,920, which we did not receive, and nor do we anticipate receiving. So this is just shy of $90,000 in state funding reductions from the budget. In Department of Revenues, there's a slight surplus of just about $12,000. We are anticipating surplus funds in conveyance taxes, about $25,000 this year, and building permits, about $45,000. There are some offset anticipated deficits. The first is in the country club pool revenue, and what I did for the pool revenue was assumed revenue similar to last season, and extrapolated them forward to the coming season. Assumed here, the assumption in this analysis is that there will be a pool this summer, and it will be generating revenue similar to last year. So as that issue progresses, I can make adjustments to that. Finally, we are experiencing a lot of private duty revenues this year, and there's a surplus of $75,000 in that account.
Is that related to all the tree stuff?
A lot of it is related to the tree stuff that Warren spoke about
I see
earlier.
them everywhere. Okay.
So we charge for the use of the officer, the use of the car, and we charge not only do we charge the payroll, but we charge a user fee, which covers the payroll taxes and all the other stuff associated with it. And we charge back to the company that's using the service. In general administration, we have an approximate $30,000 surplus due to savings in our insurance, property, auto, and liability. Parks is about a $10,000 surplus in wages for a vacant position. As we spoke earlier, debt service about a $12,000 surplus due to a refunding. Waste management is projected to experience a $40,000 surplus primarily due to savings in tip fees, bulky waste disposal, and recycling. And finally, as of December 31st, the Board of Education was reporting a deficit of $218,000. There is no impact on this analysis, as I anticipate that we would use the Amity surplus funds of about $318,000 to cover that deficit.
Do they anticipate most of that is because, or they assume?
Actually, the special ed
education,
deficit's
yeah. actually
a lot higher than that. I think it's in
Really?
$400,000 range, but they have savings within their budget that they're using to
Okay.
cover the part of that. So it's
Okay.
at $218,000 at the moment.
Wow.
And I think that's another example of what we talked about, how cooperative the Board of Ed
Yes.
and the
Right,
town
right.
are in working together on
Yes.
budget issues. That's a real tribute to Dr.
Yeah.
Stella
Yep,
and to the
definitely.
They watch
future board.
this monthly, which is very,
They
very
do.
helpful.
They do.
Yeah.
They do.
It's good.
Any questions for Tony on this?
I have one question.
Sure.
So it's kind of an odd one, but on waste management,
Mhm.
what's causing that $40,000 savings?
A lot of it's not as much tonnage as we had budgeted. It's I mean, some of it's the bidding. We got it from some
Better-
good
yeah, I was wondering if it was a
favorable
better
pricing, but
bidding or
it's
less
mostly the
usage.
tonnage that we use like a 5-year average, and
Right.
the tonnage is a little lower on the tip, mostly tip fee. A lot of it's tip fees, but even bulky waste, there's not quite as much bulky waste disposal as we'd anticipated.
That's good.
Yeah,
We're not into trash then.
that's right.
We don't create
Anything
trash.
else for Tony?
That's it, thank you, Tony.
Okay.
Okay. Tax refunds, is there a motion to approve the tax refund of $20,932.30 as proposed to us by Pat Crisco, the tax collector? Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Any questions? discussion? If not, all those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. And now we're at funding requests. The first is funding request number 151609.
Andy now, 'cause that other one just came this afternoon.
Oh, so a third one?
No, no.
No, the
The
second
second
one.
one.
Oh,
The 43,000, she's handing out the water authority one.
Okay,
Is that the one,
I see.
But 09 is the first one, it's the hydrants.
is that the one you
Yeah.
gave me?
Yeah.
Okay, so the first is funding request 1516-09 in the amount of $11,288. I'll ask Tony to, I'll make a motion that we approve it. Is there a second?
Second.
And Tony, would you go ahead and explain it?
Certainly, this is a funding request from the fire department, which is due to a large unbudgeted increase in the hydrant line where the fire department pays for the use of the fire hydrants and the lines that are attached to them. And there was a significant increase of 7.5% that was not budgeted for, resulting in the deficit in the account. And at this point in the year, there has not been identified sources of revenue that could cover within the budget. So the chief wanted to request the funding in January.
I just have to comment that they have no control over this. It's just part of their budget, but there's
Right.
no, you know, the regional water authority increases and we go rate increases and they have no say. And who knows, you know?
Too
it's
many
just-
people filling up their
nuts.
pools with water from the hydrant.
Right.
found out about
That's
that
right, in the
last
budget
Right,
process, right?
exactly.
Huh, May have to go up on that
how do
fee.
we deal with that?
Yeah.
I mean, that should not be, right?
7.5% increase. It's
Wow.
okay.
Any questions for Tony? Anything else? We have a motion and a second, correct? Jerry, we have a motion and a second?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, nothing else? If not, all those in favor? Thank you. The next item is line item transfer 1516-10 in the amount of $43,000. This is for payment of the settlement that we just approved. And Tony, do you want to speak about the source for that?
Sure.
transfer?
The source of the transfer is from the funds that the town is receiving from operations, golf operations, from the revenue sharing from Billy Casper Golf for the calendar year 2015 season. The town is receiving $50,171 from Billy Casper Golf for that season. And so this will use $43,000 of that to pay for the water bill. So it's not a contingency item or a fund balance item.
Thank you. Is there a motion to approve line item transfer 1516-10? Second. Thank you. Any other questions or discussion? If not, all those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, Tony. The extension of the electricity generation contract, we're going to postpone that.
Correct. Yep.
Do you have any other?
I do. It's just more of an FYI for you. We have put together a committee of staff to redo our website and to make it a more user-friendly, updated version of our website. We've been, Betsy and Karen and Cindy in particular, are putting a lot of work into this. We're going through an RFP process, and it's very exciting, actually, the things that can be done on a website that we're looking to incorporate into ours, and hope to roll that out coming up the next fiscal year.
So the RFP would be for a new server or just the work
It's
of
it's a
designing?
new design, new
Okay.
actually new
Functionality,
company, new functionality, new look and feel.
Does our current server offer any type of, sometimes the server itself has businesses
So we
they
have
cooperate with.
we use ours. It's the service that we use, the company we use right now, has chose not to bid on
Okay.
this new RFP.
Okay.
So where does an RFP like this get posted? I'm just kind of curious.
We posted it in all the usual places, and in addition to that, we posted it in areas where there's some research done on websites and services that these types of businesses frequent. So we have received 15, maybe, or 20, 15, I think, responses.
Who would have thought?
And is it
Wow.
still open?
No,
No, it's
Oh.
closed.
no.
So this website is custom, completely custom, is that what you're saying?
It's,
Because there are many websites now that you can.
right, so
use.
one of the big factors that we
Designers,
wanted to use was website companies that have familiarity with other municipal websites.
right.
Because they have, not only do they have, their systems are built to accommodate the town, but also they have a lot of other customers that are municipal websites, so they'll say, well, you know, this town does it this way, why don't you
Right,
try
we
it this
like
way?
that.
Or,
Makes
you know,
perfect sense.
It's a good tie-in for, learning others, so.
I'm sure our server also has some limitations that they have to build within. I mean, each server is kind of different on what they allow to use, so that's great.
Yeah, so we're all very excited about it and just wanted to give you a heads up on that, and there's more to come.
Do you have any cost?
Free.
Yeah, that's part of the analysis, and so we have the,
Not yet.
yeah, we have the final one picked. We will outline the costs, how they differ, upfront costs versus ongoing costs. So,
Yep. All right.
Thanks, Tony.
okay.
Item 13, I will move acknowledgement of receipt of the town clerk's report. Is there a second?
Second.
Any questions or discussion? If not, all those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, item 14 is minutes. Is there a motion to approve the minutes of November 10th, 2015, the regular meeting of the Board of Selectmen?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Any questions or discussion?
I gave her a couple little
Okay, typos.
tidbits. And I want you to guess in the next set what was wrong.
If not, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Is there a motion to approve the minutes of the regular meeting of the Board of Selectmen of December 9th, 2016?
So-
December
There
9th,
you go.
2015, Jerry.
You got it. I'll make
Caught
that
it. She
motion.
caught it.
I'll motion.
Motion, is there a second?
Second.
Any questions or discussion?
No life.
If not, all those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Item 15 is to acknowledge the resignation of Robin Burke from the Conservation Commission. Robin was recently appointed to the Amity Board of Ed, and as she had told us, she would be resigning from the Conservation Commission. I want to thank her very much for her service on that commission. She was a very valuable member. And Tony, you sent, I think, one suggestion, and we'll
I
send
think
out
Kathy
something else.
Gartland
Yes.
submitted one to Jerry, a name for
Okay,
consideration.
we'll circulate something before the next meeting. We should be able to vote on that at the next meeting. Okay, first Selectmen's report. Happily, it's not as long as usual because we've been spending so much time on the budget. It's taking up a good amount of time, so I'll speak quickly now. On economic development, I visited Adrienne Michi-Smith. She has a business in her home called Curtain Call. She does home decorating and window treatments. It was fascinating to see her workroom and how she does this. And apparently, she's got a good clientele. We had the article in the Woodbridge Town News. I hope you read it. It's very interesting.
I actually used her. She's awesome. Twice.
I was at the grand opening of the Palette Art Studio. That was at 245 Amity Road. That's the complex on Bradley Road. It was incredibly well attended for an opening, and I think it's going to be a very successful business here in town. I am a member of the Regional Council of Government, South Central Regional Council of Government Committee that's looking at the use of economic development grant funds. And we had the first meeting of that group. I think it's going to provide some help to the town. We're discussing how to use the funds. I continue meeting with area chief elected officials. I met with Mayor Harp, Mayor D'Agato, and First Selectman Dorsky to see where we have synergies amongst our towns. I'll just add that this morning I stopped in briefly. Betsy's not here to report on it, but she had a meeting with Chief Stewart, Jamie Scott from the Economic Development Commission, and a gentleman whose name I don't recall. He owns the bike shop, because there's a possibility of a DOT safety assessment grant where they would look at improving, pedestrian and bike safety. And we're looking at the area there. So they're coming up with proposals. In addition to our budget meetings on budget-related activities, I attended the New Haven Chamber of Commerce Regional Legislative Breakfast, which gave a sense of the upcoming legislative session, the kinds of issues that will be coming up. It's, of course, very budget-focused. I won't discuss now the issue of the car tax cap and related issues, but it will be very, very serious for us. Tony and I also met with Frontier about, Chief Sean Rowland was there, and Chief Stewart, about updating the T1 lines that are used for emergency responder communications. There was no disagreement that they need upgrading, and I think they were proceeding
Right. Yep.
quickly to do
Correct.
that, so that was wonderful. Yeah, and I guess I just want to mention in the budget category, to thank Tony again so much for the incredible work he does and his department to make things, it appears so clear and easy to us to look at it, to understand the background, to talk about the more difficult changes we have to make. And when something appears easy like that, you don't always stop and think what goes into it. So, Tony, thank you so much. On the education side, I went up to the Bethany Community School. They had a lockdown drill where I saw their security system work in a lockdown. And going in, I was certainly disturbed by it, that's what children need to do now, a lockdown scenario. But as they pointed out to me in the school, for the children, it just becomes routine, like a fire drill. Everybody knew what to do, they all did it well, and there were a couple of little things that could use improvement, so it was good to see. On the community building activities, we had our third Wisdom of Woodbridge lecture. I don't know how many, I think, Maria, you were there. And it was Nancy Yao-Masbach, who is quite a dynamo, and she spoke about Chinatowns, and Chinese towns, an evolving sense of community. Nancy had been the director of the Yale China Association, and she's now the executive director of the Museum of Chinese Ancestry in New York, and her presentation was fascinating and interesting, extremely well attended, and a good addition to our Wisdom of Woodbridge series. Appreciating town employees, I attended the reception for Rita Gdansky, who has retired after 14 years on the Amity Board of Education. Before that, she had served for 16 years as a social studies teacher at what she calls the junior high school, although she knows it's now called the middle school. And February's Person of the Month is Adam Parsons, and this is the first time we've awarded to an employee. This is for town volunteers or employees who go above and beyond. And I think everyone who knows Adam and what he does agrees that Adam goes above and beyond. There was a particular incident where on a very cold, icy day, he saw a puppy at the side of the road that had been abandoned with a torn open bag of food. He, of course, stopped, got the puppy, took it to the animal shelter. But there are so many ways that we could be thanking Adam for what he does.
Yep.
So with that, we'll go to liaison reports. The Amity Board of Ed was canceled this week, so I have no report. Maria?
Okay. Well, I attended the January 26th Recreation Commission meeting, and basically I just want to talk about the highlights because we probably know many of them. They reported really well about their other activities, but the two highlights were that was regarding the compensation for Mr. Adamovich. Town Council Weiner came in and explained to them that there was no labor problem with regards to the minimum wage deal with Mr. Adamovich, but still he reported of what he does for the Recreation Commission. I mean, I cannot believe, that when he was hired, he didn't have to do so. I mean, he was like a 3-day job for the town, but now he is all over the place and has to be in fields at 6:30 at night, at 9 o'clock. He's also working 24 hours to check everything going on with recreation. So they moved to increase for in the budget his salary. I don't know how that will go, but they agreed unanimously to increase his salary to $42,000. The other thing was about, of course, their anticipation for the decision with regards to the pool. And they were doing it at this time of the year because they want to have enough time to prepare whether they are going to open or not. And they also unanimously voted to keep the pool open. And we asked questions. There were people there who came. There were citizens. Most of them were members who really strongly feel that the pool should be open. aside from what the golf people think. So, and then again, they unanimously voted for that. So we'll see what happens.
Thank you.
And then there was a meeting of the Board of Ed on January 19, I believe, and I mean they talk about all their education stuff, etc. But really, the main thing about that meeting was the way they were going to present their budget to the board, and we all
we've
know
seen it.
we've seen it, and
Yes,
we
that's
all
fine.
know the thing. So that's it. There's one more. They went into executive session as to deal with the resignation of Dr. Stella and how they were going to replace him, I believe. So we all know that's in the works, and hopefully we will get good results.
Just as an update to that, I
Yeah.
heard that they did just decide on a search firm. So they're trying to move quickly because they're hoping to have someone in place for September, which is a quick turnaround at this point.
Yeah,
So,
right. Okay,
thank you, Maria.
you're welcome.
Tony?
Well, because unfortunately last month I had to leave the meeting a little early, I wasn't able to give my liaison report. So in that vein, I thought I would give a minute-by-minute blow of each group that I went. So I'll start with TP and Z. They were scheduled to meet on February 1st, and due to the fact that there was no public hearing scheduled, the meeting was canceled. They'll next meet on March 7th at 7:30 here in this room. The library, again, minute by minute, their scheduled meeting was February 8th. Due to some snow, it was canceled. However, they are hoping to have a special meeting.
Expectations low, so you can.
They are having a special meeting tomorrow night at 6 p.m., or they're hoping to have, they were going to get that out there if they could do that. And other than that, their next scheduled meeting is March 14th, 6 o'clock at the library.
Nice job.
That's it.
Thank you,
Minute by
Tony.
minute.
Wow, amazing.
Susan?
Okay, so Coop-Op I'm not gonna spend time on because we basically have already
Yeah,
talked about
that
Coop-Op.
that was great news, actually.
Yeah, no, that's moving in a very good direction, I have to
Yes.
say. The Economic Development Commission met on Thursday. I was not able to attend, and the minutes have not yet been posted. So I have nothing to report on that. I did attend the Police Commission meeting. There's an ongoing issue, we know a little bit about this regarding the Hazel Terrace parking business resident conflict.
Is that the dance studio thing or something?
Correct.
Right,
And
yeah.
the police had made a recommendation regarding some possible signage. I think that the police commission is likely to they're going to bring that up at their next meeting, but there was a kind of disjointedness about the public coming in and speaking, so they want everybody in the same room at the same time. So that issue has been postponed. There's ongoing concern, of course, about positions and staffing, and the level and training of new hires going forward, and overtime issues. I think that that's kind of an ongoing conversation that they're having with budget impacts, so nothing's terribly resolved about that. I just want to say that I live on Rimmon Road, and the police have done an amazing job with the tree trimmers, making that a safe situation, because I have to tell you, that's a pretty scary thing with these guys up there.
We've had a major
so-
accident there not too long ago.
Correct, and it's quite frightening to drive underneath these cherry pickers. They're, and the police have just been phenomenal. So I just want to say that. And of course, then they went into executive session to talk about the chief hire. So that was basically it. So that's my report.
So just that reminds me, you mentioned the staffing. I know
Right.
that Tony and Maria and Joe asked to
Correct.
discuss
Yeah.
the staffing again. So on Tuesday, we'll be doing the budget and we'll discuss
Great.
police again. That'll be a good opportunity.
Great.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks, Susan.
I have an easy one too, because two of them got canceled. So inland wetlands on January 20th was canceled because there were no applications to be listened to. And the Board of Fire Commissioners this past Monday was canceled because of the snowstorm. I did attend Human Services, and Mary Ellen gave us a tour of the new computer room. They're working on space issues and some other things, but it's very nice, and they redid the Mahjong room in the back. The senior center bathroom they discussed is still, I believe, still on hold. So that came up again on Monday night, but no resolution as I understand it. And Mary Ellen, to that note, said that she has a meeting coming up with you, Ellen, I believe, about doing more strategic planning.
Right,
And I think Sharon Bender will be coming to that if it hasn't happened already. The volunteer tea is scheduled for April 28th. Lee reported on the final numbers for the holiday fair, and they were quite good. And there will be some upcoming classes for kids, Tai Chi and tennis, and not kids, adults, sorry, seniors. They are kids. There was also income tax assistance available for seniors by appointment if anybody's interested. And upcoming events is a Valentine's Day party, Wear Red Day, February 11th. I guess that's here,
Tomorrow.
right? Oh, yeah, that's tomorrow, right.
Gosh, it's so close.
And a resident, interestingly, received some help in the town clerk's office. She came in about a DAR question or something, and they helped her at the town clerk's office. And she said, I guess she wanted to pay the town clerks, and obviously they're there. So I guess she gave them a check and made out to the Woodbridge Food and Fuel Fund. So
that's very nice.
Ellie brought that
As
night.
an
So that was
appreciative thing.
that was
Oh,
lovely. And they've also sent out flyers regarding the youth services programs. And that's my report.
Great. Would there be a motion to adjourn?
There would be.
Wow, let's have fun.
There would be a second. No second.
Yes.
All those in favor?
Discussion?
Discussion.
Thank you.